The business continuity management provision and guidelines is important for all supervised institutions, while the IT governance provision and guidelines is primarily for the big and some medium institutions. However, this does not mean that the other institutions should not look at it, as there are some important information in it which can be used by smaller institutions to enhance their IT structure. As I said earlier, the business continuity management provision and guidelines is an updated version, meaning that all supervised institutions should already have a business continuity plan in place based on the old provision and guidelines. Having a business continuity plan is very important, and that is why the business continuity management provision and guidelines was the first provision and guidelines that in the area of IT that was introduced by the central bank more than 10 years ago. As you all know, the central bank introduced in the first quarter of this year supervised institution IT questionnaire application. Most of you already received the first questionnaire. And most of you already sent us the information that we requested in that questionnaire. The second questionnaire that will be sent using the application will be the business continuity management questionnaire, the updated one. This, as we want to know how compliant your institution is with this guideline. However, we will not send the questionnaire to all institutions at once. If you would do this, it would mean that our Department of IT Supervision, consisting of only 4 IT auditors, would have to review almost 400 responses, and that wouldn't be acceptable. That is why we will send the questionnaire in batches, starting with batches of about 20 to 25 institutions. This for sure doesn't mean that you will wait for the questionnaire to start working on your compliance. As I said before, your institution is supposed to be compliant already. Therefore, my recommendation is to take a look at the updated version and make sure that you have everything in place based on the size of your institution. Maybe a few of you that have attended previous seminars in which we introduced our provision and guidelines can recall that we had a list of provision and guidelines that we wanted to implement. With the introduction of the IT governance provision and guidelines, we are almost at the end of this list. In his presentation, I think Kai will present this list again and inform you where we stand with regard to the implementation of the other ones in the list. There is an important aspect that I want to share with you today with regard to all the provision and guidelines that we have introduced in the past, the ones that will be presented today and in the near future. These will no longer more be provision and guidelines, but will be updated and turned into generally binding regulations, meaning that they will have a stronger legal basis that will give the central bank the necessary tools to mandate compliance and, if necessary, give out penalties for non-compliance. So bear in mind, we don't issue provision and guidelines or regulations to give institutions a hard time. When we issue regulations, we give ourselves a hard time, as we need to make sure that we have the resources and tools in place to assess the compliance to these regulations. And I can assure you that is not an easy task. It is the job of the central bank to ensure that the institutions under its supervision are conducting their business in a manner which is considered ethical as well as safe. We issue regulations because we want to have a strong and resilient financial sector, a sector that complies with international standards, and it doesn't have to be a burden for the financial institutions. our regulations has to be a tool that will guide your institution to become strong and resilient. So please go through them, read them, make sure that the ones that need to implement them has them. Pick up a committee and make sure that your company complies with the regulations of the central bank. Thank you. Kai?